I'm very sorry that I'm not able to come and be with you because I'm a real fan of cognitive behavioral therapy. But I was also very keen that you would know something about the experience which we've had in rolling this out to a very large number of people in need in our country. And let me tell you this story of how this happened. I'm an economist, but I thought that the most important thing for a society is that people should be happy. And I was studying the causes of happiness, and it became quite clear from looking at surveys like Eurobarometer or other surveys where we know how satisfied people are with their lives and we know aspects of their lives which might explain this. It became clear to me that mental health is one of the major determinants of happiness, and that therefore it was something which I should spend some time on. Actually, I've continued working on that, and I'm absolutely convinced that we can show that mental illness is the biggest single cause of misery, and this is very important, of course. So I came to investigate what can be done about mental illness, and I discovered at once, of course, that the most proven method of helping people with depression and anxiety disorders is cognitive behavioral therapy. And I was lucky enough to meet David Clarke, who was at that time at the Institute of Psychiatry in London. And he gave me a wonderful tutorials on what he had been doing in his clinic, particularly his clinic on anxiety disorders. And the fact that he has arrived at a situation where we have an ability to measure the outcomes for every single patient. With that session by session monitoring, David Clarke was finding in his clinic that you could achieve in a field situation at least 50% recovery rates with depression or anxiety disorders, and of course much reduced relapse rates thereafter. So I started working with David on how could we get these therapies more widely available, because the shocking thing is, as I'm sure you know, that in all our countries, if you do a psychiatric morbidity survey, you will find that only about a quarter of the people with diagnosable mental health conditions are actually receiving any form of treatment, either psychological or medication. So this is a completely unsatisfactory situation, and it doesn't correspond to patient choice. We know that the majority of people with these problems would like to have psychological therapy rather than medication. The vast majority get medication rather than psychological therapy. So we decided that we wanted to do something about this, and we had to make the case. And it was a very nice combination, I think, of David's ability to make the case of the effectiveness of the therapies through the results not only of clinical trials but of field rollouts on a limited scale in clinics like his own, with the economic case which I was able to supply. So let me just say a little about the economic case. I'm sure you're aware of these things, but the general public isn't. And we have to make the case in a well-informed, quantitative way to get the public to take these things seriously. And at that time, we had the Prime Minister, Tony Blair, who was worried about the fact that there were so many people not working because of illness. And we were able to say, number one, the biggest single cause of people not working and claiming incapacity benefits from the state is mental illness. In fact, it accounts for nearly half of all the number of people on incapacity benefit. From an employer's point of view, we were also able to point out that nearly half of all absenteeism is due to mental illness. And then we were also able to show, by looking at people's earnings and so on, that mental health reduces productivity at work by a substantial amount, something like 7%. and this is again an economic cost, not only to the economy but also of course to the taxpayer in lost taxes. So we were able to show that there's a huge economic cost. More recently, we've also concentrated on the fact that there's a huge cost in terms of the physical health care bill, which is caused by people with comorbid mental and physical health problems actually demanding much more physical health care, something like 50% more physical health care. And that, of course, is again an enormous cost. So the case that we made was that if psychological therapy, especially CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, was more widely available, it would actually cost the government nothing, because there would be two factors which fully covered, each of which fully covered the cost of the therapy. One was the savings on incapacity benefits and lost taxes, and the second was the savings on physical healthcare costs. What did it actually mean, this promise to expand the availability of psychological therapy? We had a long period of thinking about how to do this, and I think we did it in the right way. We need to train therapists, mainly in CBT because there's such a shortage of them. We need to accredit them, and then we need to have them, of course, get their in-service training, and then we need to be able, year after year, to expand the number of areas where we are providing an evidence-based service. So we did this over something like a 4 or 5 year period until the whole country was covered with a service of some size, but not necessarily adequate. And in fact, let me tell you where we're at now. So we built from nothing 7 years ago up to seeing nearly 1 million people and treating about 60% of those and achieving a 50% recovery rates with those who we treat. This is an important achievement, but it's nothing like enough. So where we're trying to go now is again to double the size of it over the next Parliament. We've got a new government and we're engaged in discussions about the future of the service, but the leadership of the National Health Service takes mental illness now very seriously and takes very seriously the requirement that we have in a Parliamentary Act for parity of esteem. And we're now wanting to move, and the politicians want us to move, to provide more couples therapy because family breakup is such a major a source of misery both to the adults and to the children involved. And mindfulness-based cognitive therapy as a prophylactic for people who have recovered from depression but are at risk of relapse. I've said nothing about children. Children, it was different. We've had child mental health services for a very long time, but they've not been very evidence-based. And we have this interesting organisation that I haven't mentioned so far called the National Institute of Clinical Excellence, one of the better British institutions, which reviews the evidence for how all conditions should be treated, physical or mental, and says what the National Health Service ought to be providing to patients with those particular conditions. And the situation when we started with the adults was that these recommendations were not being carried out. And the situation with children is that more children were being treated, but again, they weren't being treated according to the recommendations. The recommendations are essentially for anxiety conditions, CBT, and for behaviour problems, parent training for younger children, or one-on-one for the most disturbed younger children, then CBT based treatment for adolescents, especially for adolescents with depression. So we're now engaged in a process of transforming the child mental health services from a non-evidence-based provision to an evidence-based provision. This is led by Peter Fonagy, and this has been going also very well. We haven't yet got full outcome measurement of children, which is, of course, a very, very important objective. But that, again, is what we are planning over the next 5 years, as well as a big expansion of the availability of mental health support, psychological support for mentally ill children. The other big group, of course, of mentally ill people are the people with severe mental illness. And at the moment, we are giving very few of those psychological therapy, even though the National Institute for Clinical Excellence recommend it for all forms of psychotic or near-psychotic conditions. So it's an interesting journey that we're on. I think enormous numbers of people who have been helped who wouldn't have otherwise been helped. The situation up to now has been, of course, that if you're rich enough, you can get CBT outside the National Health Service, and if you're from the working class, you take pills. This has been the situation. This is simply not acceptable, and it's being changed. We're quite proud of how it's gone, though we know it needs to go much better. There are many problems with the fact that the local commissioners, who are the people who actually pay for it, don't always pay for enough sessions, and these are problems which we are having to tackle vigorously. But I think that our record, we were described as, the program was described as world-beating in the journal Nature. The record has attracted enough overseas attention that many countries, especially the Scandinavian countries, are considering introducing this. There's interest in Canada and a number of other European countries. And I think it is a model which, if one is starting from the pretty unsatisfactory situation which has existed in every country, it is a model which is really worth considering. It's obviously a model which is most easily adopted in a country like Italy, which has a National Health Service. And I think it could be of very great interest to people in Italy to come and look at how it's been going in England and see if you think it could be transferred. I wish you very well in your conference. I wish I could hear what is going to emerge. Perhaps someone will send me some account of the highlights, but I really have been so impressed. I'm a complete outsider to all of this, but I have learnt so much and been so impressed with the achievements of CBT that I think you are. This is the phrase which I use in the book. David Clark and I wrote a book called Thrive, which is was published last year and goes over all of this material. And I use a phrase in there, you are the people in the modern world who are at the forefront of the battle against misery. And I really admire and respect what you're doing, and I wish you every success.